Welcome back to the Motorcycle Vault. If you own a Harley right now, whether it's sitting in your garage parked outside or you're riding it every single day, I need you to understand something. You think your bike is different. You think you'll somehow avoid the problems everyone else has. But here's the brutal truth that nobody at a Harley dealership will ever tell you straight. Every single Harley owner eventually faces the exact same 5 problems. Not some owners, not unlucky owners. Every owner. These aren't random mechanical failures. These aren't flukes or coincidences. These are patterns baked into every modern Harley-Davidson motorcycle, and they will find you sooner or later. Oil leaks that start small and turn into disasters. Engine heat so extreme it literally burns your legs. Electrical nightmares that leave you stranded on the side of the highway. Clutch and transmission issues that make every ride frustrating. And the 5th one, the one almost nobody checks until it's too late. The one that's actually putting riders in the hospital. Stay with me until the end, because problem 5 is the silent killer that Harley tried to hide with recalls and safety campaigns, and understanding it could literally save your life. This video is going to save you thousands of dollars and countless headaches if you pay attention. Make sure you smash that like button right now if you're tired of hearing dealers say that's normal for a Harley when something goes wrong. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because this channel tells you the truth that dealerships don't want you to know. Let's get into it. The first problem that hits almost every Harley owner is oil leaks, and it always starts the same way. You buy your bike, whether it's brand new off the showroom floor or a clean used bike with low miles, and for the first few weeks or months, everything seems perfect. Not a drop of oil anywhere. The engine looks clean. The garage floor stays spotless. Then one day, you come home from a ride, park the bike, walk away, and when you come back a few hours later, there's a small wet spot on the concrete right under the engine. Your heart sinks a little bit. You think, not my bike. This can't be happening to me. You wipe it up, tell yourself it's nothing. Maybe you overfilled the oil last time, but the next day the spot is back, and the day after that it's bigger. What started as a slight sheen, what some people call sweating, has turned into actual drips hitting the ground. This is the most common complaint from Harley-Davidson owners across every model and every year of production. It's so universal that it's become a running joke in rider groups and online forums. People say if your Harley isn't leaking oil, that means it's out of oil. But behind that joke is a real problem that can turn dangerous fast. Where does the oil come from? The most common spots are the crankcase gaskets at the very bottom of the engine, the primary cover on the left side of the bike, the crankshaft seals front and rear, drain plugs that have worn out crush washers, and one of the most infamous spots, the stator connector plug that sits right at the front of the primary case. In the beginning, what you see is just a thin film of oil, almost like the engine is sweating. It's not pooling, just making surfaces look wet and oily. Mechanics will tell you that's just crankcase pressure pushing a tiny bit of oil past seals, and on older bikes with high miles, it's almost unavoidable. Dealers especially love to use this excuse. They'll tell you Harleys just do that. It's part of the character, it's normal, nothing to worry about. But here's what they won't tell you. There's a point where it stops being normal. When that light film turns into drops that fall onto the ground consistently, when you start seeing oil on the swing arm, on the rear tire, on the brake components, when the oil level on your dipstick starts dropping faster than it should, you've crossed from annoying cosmetic issue into legitimate safety and reliability problem. Why does this happen on Harleys more than other brands? High crankcase pressure from the design of the engine ventilation system pushes oil toward any weak point in the seals. Gaskets that get cooked by heat cycles over and over eventually dry out, harden, and lose their ability to seal properly. Aftermarket parts that don't fit quite right. Service work done at shops where mechanics don't follow proper torque specifications on cover bolts. All of these things contribute. But the bottom line is, if you own a Harley long enough, you will see oil where it shouldn't be. It's not if, it's when. Let me tell you a real story from a rider named Mike in Florida. Mike bought a 2022 Road Glide brand new. Beautiful bike, vivid black, fully loaded. He was so proud of it. Around 12,000 miles, Mike took his bike out for a Sunday ride. It was raining lightly that morning, but he didn't care. He loves riding in the rain. About halfway through his route, maybe 50 miles from home, he stopped at a gas station to fill up. While he was standing there pumping gas, he glanced down at his bike and noticed something that made his stomach turn. The entire right side of the swing arm was covered in fresh oil. The rear tire had oil splattered all over the sidewall. He walked around to the other side and saw oil dripping steadily from the bottom of the primary cover onto the ground. Mike's first thought was, how long has this been leaking? How many miles did I just ride with oil all over my rear tire? He made it home very carefully, taking it slow, avoiding any sudden braking or hard cornering because he knew the tire was compromised. He called his local Harley dealership the next morning. They told him to bring it in. The service advisor looked at it, went into the back to talk to a mechanic, came back out, and said, "Yeah, primary cover gasket is leaking. We see this sometimes. It's just one of those things." Mike asked, "Is this covered under warranty?" The advisor hesitated and said, "Well, technically yes, but we'll have to inspect it first to make sure there wasn't any improper maintenance or modifications that caused it." Long story short, they ended up covering the repair, but it took a week to get the parts and get it done. Total cost, if Mike had to pay out of pocket, $1,200 for what should have been a simple gasket. Mike told me later, if I had been checking my bike more carefully every week, I would have caught that leak when it was just starting, when it was small, and I could have dealt with it before it got all over my tire and put me at risk. So what can you do right now to avoid being in Mike's situation? First, make it a habit to visually inspect your motorcycle every single time you get back from a ride, especially a long ride. Walk around the bike slowly. Look at the bottom of the engine, the primary cover, the area around the transmission, the swing arm, the rear shock. If you see any wetness, any oil film, any fresh drips, stop and pay attention. Wipe it clean with a rag, take a photo with your phone for reference, and then check it again the next day. If it comes back in the same spot, you've found your leak. Second, check your oil level religiously. Before every long ride, before every weekend trip, pull the dipstick and make sure your oil is where it should be. If you're adding a quart of oil every 1,000 miles or less, something is very wrong. Harley might say some oil consumption is normal, but if you're burning or leaking that much, you need to find out why. Third, when you take your bike in for service, whether it's at a dealer or an independent shop, make sure they're following proper torque specifications on every bolt, especially on the primary cover, derby cover, and drain plugs. Those covers need specific torque values, usually in the range of 20 to 30 foot-pounds depending on the bolt. If a mechanic just tightens them by feel until they're snug, that's not good enough. Under-tightened bolts leak. Over-tightened bolts strip threads or crack covers. Both scenarios cost you money. And fourth, if you're handy and comfortable doing basic work on your own bike, consider upgrading to higher quality gaskets. Stock Harley gaskets are paper or cork based and they work okay for a while, but aftermarket gaskets made from materials like Veton or polyacrylate are more resistant to heat and chemicals. They last longer and they seal better. You can get a complete primary gasket kit for $50 to $100 and install it yourself with basic hand tools and a torque wrench. If your Harley is already leaving oil spots in your garage, you've officially experienced problem number 1. Don't panic. Don't ignore it. Clean it up, figure out exactly where it's coming from, and fix it before it gets worse. Because once oil gets onto your rear tire and you hit a wet corner or a patch of gravel, that slippery tire can send you down faster than you can react. Now let's talk about problem number 2. The one that makes summer riding absolutely miserable for so many Harley owners: extreme engine heat. If you ride a Harley with a twin cam engine or a Milwaukee 8 engine and you live anywhere that gets hot in the summer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're stuck in city traffic on a 90-degree day. Cars all around you moving slowly. Stop and go. Red lights. Your Harley is idling, and after just 5 or 10 minutes, you start to feel it. Heat radiating up from the engine. Your right thigh, the one close to the rear cylinder, starts to feel uncomfortably warm, then hot, then borderline painful. You shift your leg away from the bike trying to get some relief, but there's nowhere to go. The heat keeps building. Sweat starts pouring down your back. Your jeans feel like they're baking onto your skin. Some riders have told me they've literally had to pull over and get off the bike because the heat was so unbearable they couldn't take it anymore. This is not an exaggeration. This is a well-documented problem that Harley has struggled with for decades. Why are Harleys so hot? It comes down to the fundamental design of the engine. These are big air-cooled and oil-cooled V-twin engines. They generate a massive amount of heat during combustion, and the only way that heat gets dissipated is through airflow over the cooling fins on the cylinders and through the oil circulating inside the engine. When you're moving at highway speed with good airflow, the cooling system works reasonably well. But when you're sitting still or moving slowly in traffic, there's almost no airflow. The heat just builds and builds. The rear cylinder is especially bad because it's tucked under the seat and between your legs, so it gets even less airflow than the front cylinder. On touring bikes with big fairings, the situation is even worse because the fairing traps heat around the engine and the rider. Add to this the fact that modern emission regulations force Harley to run leaner fuel mixtures, which means less fuel and more air in the combustion process, and that creates higher combustion temperatures. Leaner mixtures burn hotter. Harley has tried to address this over the years with improved fin designs, better oil cooling systems, and various heat management strategies. But the bottom line is twin cams and Milwaukee 8s still run extremely hot, and riders still suffer. This isn't just a comfort issue. Excessive heat damages engines over time. When an engine runs consistently at very high temperatures, the oil breaks down faster. Synthetic oil is tough, but even the best synthetic will degrade if it's constantly being cooked at 400 or 500 degrees. Gaskets harden and crack from heat cycling. Valve seats can warp. Pistons and rings wear faster, and in extreme cases, sustained high heat can cause detonation or pre-ignition, which can destroy pistons and heads. So when your bike is running so hot that you can barely stand to sit on it, that's a warning sign that the engine is suffering too. Real story. A rider named Sarah bought a 2021 Harley Ultra Limited. Beautiful bike, top-of-the-line touring model, every feature you could want. She and her husband planned a big summer trip, riding from their home in Arizona through Nevada and California. Day one of the trip, they hit stop-and-go traffic outside Las Vegas in 95-degree heat. Sarah said within 15 minutes the heat from the engine was so intense she felt like she was sitting on top of a barbecue grill. Her legs were burning. She was drenched in sweat. She couldn't focus on riding because all she could think about was the pain from the heat. They pulled over at a rest stop and she seriously considered turning around and going home. They ended up cutting that day's ride short and finding a hotel early. When they got home from the trip, Sarah took the bike to an independent shop and had them install a premium oil cooler kit. The kit cost about $500, including parts and labor. The shop mounted an oil cooler in front of the bike where it gets good airflow, and they routed lines from the engine to the cooler and back. The difference was night and day. Sarah said it felt like a completely different motorcycle. The next time they rode in hot weather, the bike still got warm, but it was manageable. The heat wasn't painful anymore. She said it was the best $500 she ever spent on the bike. So what can you do if your Harley is cooking you alive every time you ride in warm weather? The number one most effective solution is installing an oil cooler. This is a small radiator that mounts somewhere on the bike, usually up near the front where it gets good airflow, and it cools the engine oil before it goes back into the engine. Dropping oil temperatures by 30, 40, even 50 degrees makes a huge difference in how much heat radiates off the engine toward the rider. Good oil cooler kits cost anywhere from $300 to $600 depending on the brand and features, and installation is pretty straightforward for a competent mechanic. If you're handy, you can install one yourself in an afternoon. Second, get your bike tuned with a richer fuel map, especially in the low and mid RPM range. A custom dyno tune from a reputable tuner can adjust your air-fuel ratio to run slightly richer, which lowers combustion temperatures. This costs around $300 to $500, but it makes the bike run cooler and usually improves throttle response and power too. Third, consider heat management accessories like ceramic-coated exhaust pipes and heat shields that mount between the engine and your legs. These don't solve the problem, but they help deflect some of the heat away from you. And fourth, change your riding habits in hot weather. If you're going to be stuck in stop-and-go traffic on a 90-degree day, consider taking a different route, leaving earlier or later to avoid the worst traffic, or even just not riding that day. I know that's not the answer anyone wants to hear, but sometimes the smart move is to recognize that your bike has limitations and work around them. If you've ever felt like your Harley was literally cooking your legs, welcome to problem number 2. It's real, it's common, and it's fixable. Don't just suffer through it thinking it's normal. Fix it and enjoy your rides again. Now we're moving into problem number 3, and this is the one that can leave you stranded on the side of the highway in the middle of nowhere. Electrical system failures, specifically the charging system, the stator, the voltage regulator, and the battery. These 3 components work together to generate electrical power and keep your battery charged while you ride. When this system fails, and it will fail eventually on almost every Harley, you're in trouble. The bike won't start, or it starts but dies while you're riding. Lights dim, the dash goes haywire, and you're stuck calling for a tow truck. Here's how the system works. The stator is like an alternator. It's mounted inside the primary case on the left side of the engine, and as the engine spins, the stator generates alternating current electricity. That AC power goes to the voltage regulator, which converts it to DC power and regulates the voltage to keep it at the right level for charging the battery, usually around 14 to 14.5 volts. The battery stores that power and provides electricity to start the bike and run all the electrical accessories. Sounds simple, right? But here's the problem. The stator sits inside the primary case, which means it's bathed in hot primary fluid or engine oil depending on your model. That constant heat breaks down the insulation on the stator windings over time. Eventually, the insulation fails, wires short out, and the stator stops producing power. The voltage regulator is mounted externally, usually under the seat or near the battery, and it generates a lot of heat during operation. Over time, the internal components inside the regulator burn out from heat stress. And the battery, well, batteries have a limited lifespan anyway, but if they're being overcharged by a failing regulator or undercharged by a failing stator, they die even faster. The result is a cascade of failures. Stator starts to fail, voltage drops, battery doesn't charge fully, battery dies. Or regulator fails, voltage spikes, battery gets overcharged and cooks itself, or battery dies, you replace it, but the stator or regulator is also bad, so the new battery dies too. It's a frustrating cycle that costs money every step of the way. Real story. Tom bought a 2019 Harley Fat Bob, his dream bike. At around 40,000 miles, Tom was riding on the highway about 60 miles from home. Suddenly the dash light started flickering, the engine started running rough. Power surged up and down. Then, everything shut off and the bike coasted to a stop on the shoulder. Tom had no idea what happened. He called roadside assistance, got towed to the nearest Harley dealer, and they diagnosed it as a failed stator and voltage regulator. Parts and labor, $1,200. Tom was furious because the bike wasn't that old and didn't have crazy high miles. But the service advisor told him, yeah, we see this around 40 to 50,000 miles pretty regularly. It's just one of those things. Tom paid the bill, got his bike back, and 6 months later, the same thing happened again. Different components failed this time, but same charging system problems. That's when Tom started doing his own research and found out this is a known pattern on Harleys. He eventually upgraded to a higher quality aftermarket voltage regulator and better battery, and the problems stopped. But he spent close to $2,000 and dealt with 2 roadside breakdowns before he figured it out. What can you do to avoid Tom's nightmare? First, buy a cheap multimeter and learn how to use it. You can get a perfectly good multimeter for $20 at any auto parts store. With the bike running, touch the multimeter probes to the battery terminals and check the voltage. It should read between 13.8 and 14.5 volts. If it's below 13 volts, your charging system isn't working right. If it's above 15 volts, your regulator is overcharging and will kill your battery. Check this every month. It takes 30 seconds and gives you early warning of problems. Second, learn how to test your stator. You'll need to access the stator connector, which usually requires removing a cover or two, but it's not hard. With a multimeter set to measure resistance, check the resistance between each stator wire and ground. It should read infinite, meaning no connection. If you get any reading at all, your stator is shorted to ground and needs replacement. You can also measure resistance between the stator wires themselves, which should be somewhere between 0.2 and 0.5 ohms depending on your model. If you get wildly different readings, the stator is failing. Third, consider upgrading to a higher quality voltage regulator before the stock one fails. There are aftermarket regulators that handle heat better and are more reliable than stock Harley regulators. They cost around $150 to $200 and are a direct bolt-in replacement. Many riders do this proactively around 30 or 40,000 miles and never have regulator problems. And fourth, don't overload your electrical system with tons of accessories. Every accessory, light, heated grip, phone charger, upgraded stereo system, all of that pulls more power from the charging system. If you're going to add accessories, make sure your charging system can handle it, or consider adding a second battery or auxiliary power system. If you've ever been stranded with electrical gremlins, or if you've gone through multiple batteries in a short time, you've met problem number 3. It's frustrating, it's expensive, and it happens to almost everyone. But with simple monitoring and proactive upgrades, you can beat it. Problem number 4 is something that affects the riding experience every single day, and it drives Harley owners crazy. Clutch and transmission issues, specifically clutches that don't fully disengage, making it hard or impossible to find neutral. Clutches that drag, causing the bike to creep forward even with the lever pulled in. Shifts that clunk violently between gears, especially first to second, and clutches that start slipping earlier than they should. These problems are incredibly common, and they usually get worse over time until you're fighting the bike on every ride. The clutch on a Harley is a wet multi-plate clutch that lives inside the primary case. It's operated either by a cable or a hydraulic system depending on the model, and it requires very specific adjustment to work correctly. When everything is set up right, the clutch should fully disengage when you pull the lever, allowing smooth shifts and easy neutral selection. But when anything is off, the whole system goes to hell. Common causes include improper clutch cable or pushrod adjustment after service work, using the wrong type of fluid in the primary case, worn clutch plates from hard riding or abuse, and primary chain tension being incorrect. One of the most common triggers for sudden clutch problems is when someone has work done on the primary case, like a stator replacement or cam chain tensioner job, and the mechanic doesn't properly adjust everything when they put it back together. Real story. Jake owned a 2020 Lowrider S beautiful bike. He loved it. At 35,000 miles, he started having stator problems, so he took the bike to a local independent shop to have the stator replaced. The shop tore into the primary case, replaced the stator, buttoned everything back up, and gave Jake his bike back. Jake rode it home and immediately noticed something felt wrong. The clutch didn't feel the same. Finding neutral was nearly impossible. The bike would creep forward at stoplights, even with the clutch pulled all the way in. Jake took it back to the shop and told them something was wrong. They looked at it, made some adjustments, and said it should be fine now. But it wasn't. The problem persisted. Jake ended up taking it to a different shop, a Harley specialist, and they found that the first shop had not properly adjusted the clutch pushrod and had left the primary chain too loose. The specialist fixed it correctly, charged Jake another $700, and the bike finally felt normal again. Jake lost almost 2 weeks of riding time and spent way more money than necessary because the first shop didn't know what they were doing. How do you prevent or fix clutch and transmission problems? First, learn the proper clutch adjustment procedure for your specific model. Some Harleys use cables that need a specific amount of free play at the lever, usually 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch. Others use hydraulic systems with internal adjustments. Whatever your bike has, learn how it's supposed to be set and check it regularly. If you have work done that requires opening the primary case, verify the clutch adjustment yourself before you ride away from the shop. Second, use only the correct fluid in your primary case. Harley specifies either primary chain case fluid or engine oil depending on the model year. Don't mix, don't substitute, use what the manual says, and change it according to the schedule, usually every year or 10,000 miles. Third, if your clutch starts slipping under hard acceleration, it's time for new plates. Don't keep riding it hoping it'll get better. Slipping clutch plates generate heat which warps the pressure plate and basket, which then requires more expensive repairs. Replace the plates when they're worn and save yourself money. And fourth, make sure your primary chain tension is correct. Too loose and it slaps around, too tight and it binds. Either way, it affects how the clutch operates. If you've ever fought with your Harley trying to find neutral or had shifts that feel like the transmission is going to fall out, you've experienced problem number 4. It's annoying, it's common, and it's usually fixable with proper adjustment and maintenance. Now we're at problem number 5. And this is the one that honestly scares me the most because it's the one that can actually hurt you or kill you, and it's the one that almost nobody checks until it's too late. Brake fluid maintenance. When was the last time you changed the brake fluid in your Harley? Not the brake pads, not the rotors, the fluid. If your answer is never, or I don't remember, or I think it was done when I bought the bike years ago, you're in the danger zone right now. Here's what most riders don't understand about brake fluid. The fluid used in Harley brakes .4 is hygroscopic, which means it absorbs water from the air over time. Even in a sealed system, moisture gets in through microscopic pores in rubber hoses and seals. That water mixes with the brake fluid, and 2 very bad things happen. First, water lowers the boiling point of the fluid dramatically. Pure .4 has a boiling point around 450 degrees Fahrenheit. But with just 3% water contamination, the boiling point can drop to under 300 degrees. If you're doing hard braking going down a mountain or in a panic stop situation, your brake fluid can actually boil. When brake fluid boils, it creates vapor bubbles. Vapor compresses, unlike liquid. That means when you squeeze the brake lever, instead of transmitting force to the calipers, you're just compressing vapor. Your lever goes soft, pulls to the bar, and you have little to no braking power. Second, water and brake fluid causes corrosion inside the brake system. Calipers, master cylinders, ABS modules all have internal metal parts that rust when exposed to water. That rust forms particles that get pushed through the system and can jam pistons or damage seals. Harley has had major problems with brake failures related to old contaminated brake fluid. There have been recalls and safety campaigns specifically addressing this, but dealers don't push brake fluid changes because it's a cheap service that doesn't make them much money. They'd rather sell you tires or exhaust systems. Real story. A group of riders was doing a weekend trip through the mountains. Beautiful twisty roads, steep grades, lots of elevation change. The group leader was on a Harley Road King with probably 60,000 miles. On one of the downhill sections with multiple tight switchbacks, he started riding his brakes pretty hard to keep his speed under control. About halfway down the mountain, his front brake lever suddenly got really soft and spongy. He squeezed harder but wasn't getting much braking, tried to use the rear brake more to compensate, came into a tight right-hand turn a little too fast, couldn't scrub enough speed, went wide and low-sided into the guardrail. The bike was totaled. He broke his collarbone and had road rash all over his arms and legs. When they investigated what happened, the brake fluid in his front system was dark brown, full of water, and the boiling point was so low that it vaporized under the heat from braking on the descent. If he had changed his brake fluid every couple of years like he was supposed to, that crash never happens. What do you need to do right now? Change your brake fluid every 2 years or 20,000 miles, whichever comes first. I don't care how the bike feels, how the brakes seem to work, how many miles you ride. 2 years, that's it. Old fluid is dangerous. Second, when you change it, make sure you flush the entire system, including the ABS module if your bike has ABS. Many shops will flush the calipers but skip the ABS module, which means you're still riding with contaminated fluid in part of the system. Third, use only DOT-4 brake fluid from a reputable brand and use fresh fluid from a sealed bottle. Don't use fluid that's been sitting open on a shelf for months because it's already absorbed moisture from the air. And fourth, test your brake lever feel regularly. It should be firm with a defined bite point. If it ever feels soft or spongy, or if you have to pull the lever farther than normal to get braking power, your fluid is bad or there's air in the system. Get it checked immediately. If you've been riding your Harley for years and you've never changed the brake fluid, you're riding a ticking time bomb. This is problem number 5, the silent killer. Fix it today. These 5 problems hit every Harley owner sooner or later. Oil leaks, crazy heat, electrical failures, clutch and transmission issues, and neglected brake fluid. But now you know. You know what to look for. You know how to prevent them. You know how to fix them before they turn into expensive disasters or dangerous situations. Your Harley can last 100,000 miles or more if you stay ahead of these issues instead of reacting after they bite you. What's your biggest Harley problem? Have you dealt with any of these? Drop your story in the comments, smash that like button if this video helped you, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more honest Harley content that dealers don't want you to see. Share this video with every Harley owner you know because this information could save them thousands of dollars or even save their life. Thanks for watching. Ride smart, stay safe, and remember, knowledge beats dealer excuses every time.